You're watching Cable 2.
Hi, welcome to Let's Talk, a Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools podcast designed to give timely and relevant information to our school community. I'm so excited today. We are going to be talking about the topic of providing the very best services to our students with disabilities throughout schools across our school district. And so with me today, I am joined by our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Paula Wilkins, and two national experts who are working with our school district right now to assess, analyze, and help us design a great plan for moving forward that includes professional development, the very best structures, and the very best messaging and communication we can have as we move forward. So basically I have Deborah Taub with me and also Diane Rindak. And both of these consultants, we call them national experts because they've worked with districts across the country to help improve systems. And our goal with all of this is to improve the learning for every one of our students in Winston-Salem Forsyth County School, all 53,000, but really focusing in on, are we providing the very best educational opportunities for our students with disabilities? So with that, we're going to get started on some questions today. So thank you all so much for joining us. And my first question is really going to be it can be any of you answer. We can start with one and then just add on to it. But basically, what are inclusive instructional practices? And how is this similar to work we're already doing in our system or different than work we're doing within our school system?
Right.
Well, inclusive instruction is all about providing the support needs for our students in the environment where they residentially live as best as possible with their age peers and grade level peers. And so we want to do that as much as possible. In our system, traditionally, we've had a lot of programs in classrooms to support our students and provide services, and we want to try to create those opportunities right where they are.
Anything to add?
I just want to add, we've had lots of conversations with district level personnel, with teachers, with families, with principals, and one of the things we've been hearing fairly regularly is how this does entwine with what you're already doing, with your deeper learning work, with your MTSS work, with your code of conduct work. All of that is based on the same kind of premises of it's about the individual student, it's about problem solving, it's about making sure that everybody's becoming the expert learner that they can be.
And what's really nice about inclusive instruction practices is that it really focuses on not just combining all of the efforts in the school district,
right,
but it brings it to the school that the student would attend if they did not have a disability.
Right.
So they get to go to school with their siblings and the other children in their neighborhood, who would be going to that school also. And the more that we can build those services within the residential schools, the more they will have the opportunity to interact with those students and develop relationships and support each other's growth across the board.
So inclusive practices are important to everyone, and
Absolutely.
I'm really excited about us moving forward in this direction. I mean, we have evidence of that, but we want system-wide. So again, we don't want pockets of excellence, but system-wide excellence around inclusive practices. And I will tell you, we're going to talk about the why, but this is personal for me. My own daughter, everyone has heard my story, has special needs, and from pre-K all the way into kindergarten, I mean, she was in a gen ed setting in kindergarten and in first grade and in second grade in a regular classroom. Megan has Down syndrome, as everyone knows. And that experience has made a huge difference for her in her early development, but also for all the kids that were in the classroom with her. To this day, when I see kids that might have gone to school with her, they always talk about Megan, and so do her teachers. And so I feel like inclusion is so important for our children. And so I wanted to ask, can you all talk about? You all have done this around the country. Like, what is the why behind inclusion, and how does it benefit for both students that have disabilities and their non-disabled peers?
I'm just going to say there are so many whys to do this. If we first just talk about the students with disabilities, what we have found is even students who have been in segregated classrooms or in segregated schools for a number of years, I mean, up to 10, 12 years, getting them in with their non-disabled peers has made such a difference in their growth, both academically, socially, how they participate in life overall. They might not catch up with the other students in that class, and that's not the intent. The intent is for them to have access to the general education curriculum, have access to that information from a general education teacher who has the expertise in teaching that. So in getting that access, they are learning so much more than we ever even thought they could learn. And they're building relationships with their classmates that then turn into, as you just mentioned, long-term relationships, long-term interactions, so that as adults, they also know how to interact with people, and they have friends who can actually support them as in adult life, which we all have. We all have support networks. So in addition to that, I'm sorry, I'm just
I know you love this. It's all good.
and then in addition to that, we also know that the outcomes for the students who do not have disabilities, who are in those classrooms, are also better than what we were achieving before inclusive education services, both academically as well as socially. And in building those networks. So do you want to add to that? I've just kind of like went out there, sorry.
That's great. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think what I can do is give you kind of a picture. You talked about Megan, your daughter. We were working with the district a little while back, and they had a student who was eligible for their alternate assessment, so they have really extensive support needs. And this student, when he started in the school, he was a middle schooler, he would look down, he would shuffle, he had a communication system that if he did communicate, he would use that sometimes, but usually he just mumbled. Expected everybody to kind of do everything for him. If he dropped a pencil, he expected somebody to pick it up. He never really went to problem solve for himself or anything like that. They moved him into some general education classes, and this student thrived. And he's not a single student. Like, this is what we see all the time. He started sitting up, he started talking. He needed to use his communication system less because people understood him more, because he was standing up, he was walking with pride. There was a class-wide Jeopardy class or Jeopardy activity in the social studies class where everybody had to answer questions and all of that. He won. Like, there was no like, oh, we're going to give you this boost first. He won, straight out won. Yeah. And then when he moved to high school, they took him off of the alternate assessment, put him back in the general education assessment because he was learning so much. He'd made so much progress. He has a girlfriend. He's playing with kids at on the soccer or the basketball. Oh my gosh, court, that's the word I'm looking for.
Yes.
I mean, he is one example of how this just affects your entire life.
And there are just so many examples like that for kids with various types of disabilities and various types of levels of needs. So it's just
and I want to, and I know you want to say something too, Paula. I wanted to piggyback because you all talked about two things I think are really relevant for our parents, our teachers, our whole community, and that is there's such a wide range. I mean, some students, having a learning disability is students with learning disabilities have got to be in their regular, I mean, I've seen for many years that not being pulled out necessarily, being in your classroom for that core instruction around that is on grade level is critical.
And with the supports and services that they need.
Exactly. And then you're talking about the students with extensive support needs. Can you talk, I think it's really important to know, we are not saying that, this is not one size fits all. No. It's student by student. Right. Yes. Can you describe more about this? Basically, we're not just saying we're going to take everybody and just place them in the classrooms, and this is not that. Can you talk more about when a district does this right, and that's what we're going to be doing, what does this look like? How are the decisions made? Sure. And I don't know, Paula, were you going to go in that direction, or were you going to say something different than that?
Well, I was just going to connect to the fact that as we look at the outcomes for the North Carolina Portrait of a Graduate and personal responsibility and developing that in all of our students, inclusion will do that because it mirrors the real world and it teaches all students the skills they need to be successful in life and to adapt and connect with others who are different from them and to create empathy and understanding and connection. So I would just not want to lose that
Yes,
as
right.
a critical piece around this work being important.
Exactly right. And the portrait of a graduate is not just for some students, it's for all students. And if we want kids to be critical thinkers, and we want them to be able to collaborate, and we want them to be able to, all of that, they have to be exposed to that.
Yep.
And so let's go back to then, we have so many varying levels of students and what their exceptionality actually is, or what their disability is. And you're going to hear me you're going to hear me say exceptionality, because for some reason, disability just sounds like something's wrong. And I know that's the language we use, because that's the state adopted language and national adopted language. But can you talk about how should the decisions made? Because we're not just saying we're going to stop sending students, especially when their parents say, I want them to go to this school, or I want them in this classroom. Can you talk about what that will look like for us?
So we've worked with the TIE Center, which is a national federally funded technical assistance center on inclusive policies and practices. And we've worked with other organizations, and we've done other work too, but that's one of the places where you can really see the work outlined for you. It's tiecenter.org, and they have what's called an inclusive education roadmap, and it works through implementation science, which is this field of research on how to create change that lasts.
Yes.
Right? We don't want this to be something that happens while you're here, and then if you guys graduate, or not graduate, retire, or something happens, you graduate.
I love this.
It still continues. It's a culture shift, and that takes a long time. It's not something that's done in 4 years. It's not something that's done in 5 years. It continues and is constantly having to be re-evaluated and supported, and shifts made based on what's happening. So what we start with is building a district inclusive instructional leadership team that has people from all of your district area. And we've already started this here. We've got family members, we have principals, we have district people, we have EC, we have general ed. You've got a nice range of people on there who talk about where is our system right now and where do we want to be. And then from that, start to build action plans around making that work happen. And then we do the same type of thing with schools as they come aboard. We're not going to tell a school they have to do this. But there are schools who've already said, we want to do this, we want to be part of this. And so we'll start with those schools and help them to build their own inclusive instructional leadership team, help them to build their own action plans that fit their context. We're huge believers that coming in and somebody saying, well, this is what you're gonna do, does not work. It doesn't work for how we learn, it doesn't work for how we make change, and it doesn't work if we want to continue a process over time. So I know you have things to add to that, but.
Well, and I think what I do want to add, I want to back that up totally, and that it really is district driven. It's not external consultant driven.
No, yeah.
So, but along with that, trying to also look at how do you build initial implementers, and work with the schools and the teachers and the parents who are ready to try this, and let's figure out what that looks like in this school with these students and with these adults who are providing the services, and try to work out the kinks, because they will be different. That will be different in every school that we work with, in every district. So, and then along with that, thinking about, which schools do you start with, and then which schools want to come on in the next year and the following year. But in addition to just kind of adding schools, we are also very focused on building the local capacity. Because while we love you guys and we love being in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County schools, you don't need us, forever. And we work with other districts and to do this. So we want to build your capacity to do that, because this process takes a long time, and we want to be able to leave you with people who can continue that work with additional schools, as you continue to add them, over the years.
And I just add around the coaching and capacity building. So a critical role of our consulting team is to think about how do we build our coaching capacity, and that's looking at both general education coaches and special education coaches to work with school-based coaches to provide support to teachers. And so we are very clear that this will be an intentional process and a case management process, thinking about school context to be successful.
And I know we said that that it's we're going school by school, we're going classroom by classroom, but there So not addressing inclusionary practices is not going to be an option. So what I will say is when we say we're going classroom by classrooms, school by school, it's to support and help people make this shift.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We know, so it's not like if there's a building leader that says, nope, I don't agree with this,
Right.
like that's not an option, because we are moving toward being an inclusionary, a district of inclusion that approaches every student, individually, which I know we already do that. We have
Right.
we have the most
Absolutely.
amazing, I'm in EC
Yeah.
classrooms across our district, and
Yeah.
we have amazing teachers and teacher assistants
Absolutely.
and leaders doing incredible work.
Yeah.
It's about helping with, as we sit at the IEP table with parents, with the administrative team, and we look at students and what they're capable of doing, not what
Right.
they're not capable of doing, how can we give them the most inclusive instruction, and if they need something more, they can still get that. And I think that's critical. Or even schools, like I don't want parents to think, oh, we're not going to continue with locations like Lowrance Carter,
Right,
or like there may be a need for that. Can we talk a little bit more about that? Because I want people to understand there's an expectation for how we support our children across the system now, but even moving forward, and it's about a continuous growth model. So it's not like you can opt out,
Right.
but that we understand it's going to take time and support. But can you talk more about how the decisions will be made? And they right now they are being made through the IEP team. But how will that maybe look a little bit different as we move forward? Because again, some of the teams have made the decisions for a more restrictive setting. And so when a child might be able to be in a less restrictive setting. So
Right.
can we talk about that a little bit?
So I want to talk a little bit from a local context standpoint. Is one of the things that we're working to build capacity around is to give access to services at residential schools.
Yes.
And so one of the things that has been a challenge for our district, as in others, is thinking about capacity. And so a lot of centralized access to services has been done, but if we begin to build it at homeschool sites, it'll be available for students where they are. I think the other thing to note is we already have folks doing this work. So many schools are already doing co-teaching models, supportive
Absolutely.
models to provide support for our students with the most extensive support needs. And so in many of those, it's just scaling what they're already doing.
Right.
Exactly.
And for others, it will be bringing them in to be able to learn about the practices happening. And so I think one of the things that will be critical in the work ahead is how do we leverage the bright spots?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because everything is not broken.
No, it's not.
And we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yes.
We have excellence happening in our schools every day.
Yeah.
And the real opportunity is to harness it for even more excellence in our district.
And in
So glad you said that.
Yeah, me too. And in doing that, what we're really talking about doing is building the option, adding the option of having those services in general education classes for inclusive education practices to be used. It's not eliminating other options, but shifting those over time, but not eliminating those, rather adding on to that the inclusive option, which really it's happening in some schools with some teachers, but has not necessarily been an option for all parents who have students with children
And I
with
think
disabilities.
I love it because again, it's critical, and I think now we've both said that there is some great work being done, and I think our EC educators that are working with our students with disabilities every day are doing incredible work, and they will rise to whatever the challenges are. They will rise to the vision that is created. And I think it's important that when we talk about support, so if you say, if there have been students traditionally that you have said, oh, well, this program would be a better option, and now you can't go to your residential school, but now we're at the table and we're saying, no, you know what? This child can function in our gen ed classroom with supports. Can we talk about when we say with supports? Because I think that is what our parents are going to want to know, because sometimes it's even the parent that has fear about their child. Like really getting the right services and acceptance and all of that. And so I think when we say supports, what have you all seen in your work across the country of where support is really right and really good, and that where people can say,
Yeah.
I can do this because I
Yes.
know I'm going to have support.
Absolutely.
I think one of the key pieces, and you guys started off even before we came doing this, this is not a special education piece.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is a school district piece. And so general ed is just as involved as special ed, and it's about blending those two pieces together so that all students have access to those expertise. And what we've seen and what we've heard here, including, there's no teacher who can't went into teaching for the big bucks or for the, I don't like children.
Yes,
Right?
true.
Every teacher's here because they want to do what's best for children. But if you've spent your whole life not being around people with disabilities or not seeing what they're capable of, then you do think this separate place is a better place for them, because that's what we've been taught through our educational system, through our practices, through the way our communities work. And what we work to do is show that, A, it's not necessarily what's best, right? There are ways we can shift things. And B, we will make sure that every single person has the supports and structures that they need to be successful. There's nothing worse than going into a classroom and feeling as if, I don't know what I'm doing. What happens if I fail this kid? And so we want to make sure that the general ed teachers and the special ed teachers have that collaboration, have those supports, have the professional learning, the structures in place to help them be successful, which then helps the students be successful.
And I think in looking at how to assist those teachers in doing
Yeah.
that, we also know that when we do professional learning, that you
Yeah.
can't just do here's a work session, we're
Right.
going to do this, now go off and do that,
Right.
use these practices that you just demonstrated that you know,
Right.
go use them now. Well, part of the problem is you go back to your school as a teacher, and the system isn't set up necessarily for
Right.
you to be able to use what you just learned. So thinking about the infrastructure of what's there, how do people collaborate,
Yeah.
to use those skills that are being taught, but also going past that professional learning session and getting back into the classroom with teachers and helping them implement and use and model for them and support them as they're now taking that new expertise and using it in the classroom. So the whole model is of technical assistance with coaching is really different from how historically most school districts have provided
and that's
professional
been
learning.
some of the feedback we've gotten in the last couple of years. I've spent a lot of time talking to individual teachers and some of our leaders as well, has been around consistent professional learning.
Yes.
And the coaching. And now we've got people in our EC department, and I know that we only had room for 3 people up here, but Tammy Norwood is our Chief Program Officer for EC, and we've got a great team as well of educators that this is what they went into education to be teachers, starting out as teachers of students with disabilities, and now they've advanced into other leadership roles in the system. But that's been a consistent message. It's like that clear, consistent professional development with coaching. So as I'm hearing when we talk about supports, clear professional learning, ongoing, not one time, not one and done, ongoing with professional learning, that on-site technical assistance and coaching. And then I've also heard so all of that, resources, making sure that as teachers need resources. I was in a classroom that I subbed last year with one of our, was a self-contained classroom in one of our schools, and the teacher had, here Ms. McManus, you're going to be teaching math. There are 5 kids in the room. They all have a different level. Here's your materials. Boom, boom, boom. I mean, she was ready to go, and that takes a lot. So making sure they have the resources. So professional learning resources. I know I get asked a lot is, does support mean additional personnel, or does it mean, so I wanted, because a lot of times when people hear support, they think, oh good, more human capital. So can we talk about that? Because again, support, professional learning and coaching, ongoing, resources, and now let's talk about people. What does that look like? And in your experience, I'd love to hear it, because I think that is a lot of times what people think. Add another person, add another, so can you address that?
So I'll make one point
Yeah,
before
sure.
you all give the
Yeah.
expert answer. a lot of times it's not about additional people, but repositioning and reallocating
Yes.
current professionals to support. Because if the services look different, the role of the educators will look different.
Absolutely.
And so I think some of what we'll need to problem solve around is how do we differentiate or adapt support to provide the optimal services? And so
Right.
that will be a shift for us to think about. And the other point I would say, you hear us talk a lot about general education because a lot of general education teachers may not have had the same supports, training around universal design for learning and strategies
True.
to support students that need differentiated educational supports. And so a lot of that will be the supports we'll provide our general education classrooms to ensure the success.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And our building leaders are going to be critical in that because,
Absolutely.
you know, as a former principal, assistant principal, being in my classrooms, helping my teachers through when they were struggling or when they needed more support or when they needed, and then my site-based coaches,
Yeah.
we were in classrooms all the time because that's what support looks like. You got to be in the work with your folks. And so I think there's a whole layer of implications around our building leaders as well. And many of them, that is where they spend their time. They're in classrooms, they're working side by side with teachers. And those schools that continue to get results, better results for all kids, are the ones doing that. I mean, they're in their classrooms, they're supporting teachers. They feel their role is as a coach. That's what we're going to need across the masses, across all schools, if we're going to move from pockets of excellence to district-wide excellence. But did you, Diane, were you going to say something
Well,
different?
I was just going to support what Paula, what you were saying, because thinking about co-teaching, co-planning, co-teaching, and co-assessing what's happening for students, and the role of general education teachers who have the expert knowledge about the content, and then special education teachers who have a lot of pedagogy and accommodations and modifications, but using those two sets of expertise together so that they can think through things together. But most teachers in both general education and in special education, most teachers don't have a lot of experience on how to do that co-teaching, how to collaborate, how to best use the supports that you have so that let's go for a teaching assistant, where sometimes there's an extra teaching assistant in a classroom for whatever reason. Usually if it's for a student with disabilities, you see a lot of what we think about as hovering, like, taking care of the student and being certain all of this is fine. But what we know is that the more that any of those people, either teacher or the teaching assistant, is there when the student needs and then goes away and does other things in the class, and then, with an eye to this student, okay, they need this, or that student needs this, but they're walking away. So it's not the same role that we've had people in the past. So trying to figure out how to get that expertise to everybody and the time to co-plan, the time to think about how can we collaborate in this context, in this school, is really important. So in thinking about resources, one of the things that I'm certain will come up will be time for planning and being certain that every set of teachers that can be collaborating have the time to do that rather than having to do it outside of work hours.
Absolutely. And you know what, I personally and our leadership team is committed to figuring out that issue because again, people can do wonderful things when they have time to plan for it. And to expect people to plan after hours from 6 to the time you put your kids to bed is really not effective. It's not going to help us retain teachers either. And this idea of planning, I mean, I'd rather, to have time to plan means when you're with kids, you can deliver such high quality. And that is one of the things, as I've met with some of the teachers, not even with extensive support needs, but a teacher that has 30 to 40 children in a more of a resource setting. They're planning for 40 different individual needs of students
across all the subject areas.
And it really, that has been a sore subject because they want to do great work there, and then the paperwork and the compliance part of working sometimes in this space can also be a challenge. And so I really want us to tackle that, and I want our teachers that are watching this to know we are going to tackle that. How do we really, and not just leave it to each school by school to figure out time for planning, but how do we really do that as a system?
Yes.
And this is honestly, as we think about change, this is the time for change, and this is the time to innovate and think differently about making sure that our educators are equipped with time and resources to actually do this work at the highest level. Our kids
Absolutely.
deserve it, and we're not talking about it anymore. We are going to have clear changes moving forward as a system. And so we have like 1 minute left. I've been given the time limit. So this summer is going to be, we're going to get some clear messaging out this summer about the direction we're headed. There's going to start to be training this summer, and a lot of training for teachers will be coming on co-teach, on continuing to differentiate instruction, because this is going to support all of our children. It's going to be life-changing for some of our students with disabilities, but it's also going to be incredibly helpful to all children when we think about
Absolutely.
differentiation. And so as we think about fall, just one sentence from each of you. What could a person coming back to school in August, a student coming back, like if there's something that they will feel, that they will see that could potentially either look a little bit different or support our movement in a direction of inclusion, what would that be? I'll give you a second to think about it. Just one sentence. It could be your hope for the August. It could be what you expect to see in August. It could be what could someone expect to start seeing in training in August, just anything as we close out. One sentence from each of you.
So I'll do my one sentence,
You start.
but I'll add two
It could be
things.
more than one if you
So
can't
one
get it in one.
is a menu of ongoing professional learning supports. And
Okay.
so teachers can identify their time, need, format of how they access professional learning and coaching support available to think, problem solve with teachers around current situations, needs, and planning ahead as they think about their school context, needs, classrooms. So those would be the two I would say.
Thank you.
For me, I think the one thing that would be most powerful would be coming with a problem-solving mindset of the problem is not in the student. The problem is in the environment, it's in the curriculum, it's in the instruction, it's in the materials. Those are the barriers. How do we reduce or remove those barriers for all students?
Awesome.
And I have two also. One is the mindset with what you were saying, Debbie, but also the mindset of accepting and supporting the idea that special education is a service
Yes.
that goes to the student, rather than it being a place that students have to go to.
Right.
I think that above anything I'm really hoping to hear that more and more, and how that changes how we talk about students and what we do.
Right.
And then the other thing, my second thing, is differentiated levels of support, technical assistance, intensive technical assistance and support from the district and us for the schools who are starting to be the initial implementers, the people who want to kind of like be go over the frontier, first, but also universal supports through professional learning and some other ways.
Thank you. So I'm excited about the future, and I am so glad that we have a great team, but I'm also so glad that Diane and Deb are here to help us. We can't do this alone.
Absolutely.
And so we're wrapping up. Thank you so much for the incredible information. And that is a wrap on Let's Talk. Remember, as we move forward, we are talking about all of our students and our students with disabilities. It's just about how we serve them, not the place, but the how, because we're talking about all of our students. And so excited about the next steps and more to come. Thank you everyone for tuning in today.